Hey everybody, welcome to another edition of 10 Ton Hammer Talks. Today, I'm pretty excited about this episode. I think there's a lot to say about it, but definitely I think we're going to have a lot of fun with it. So I'm going to pass over to Jeremy, and he can kind of get you guys started and give you the info for the show if you haven't seen it before while I get a few things set up here.
Absolutely. So, in what has become my tradition for the beginning of each episode, I will start by thanking Tenton Hammer. They do employ us, they allow us to write all sorts of cool stuff, and they're the reason why we're able to do this show. I guess Twitch too, but mostly Tenton Hammer. Yeah, definitely. If you haven't gone to tentonhammer.com before, definitely check it out. Just a bunch of good gaming people there that write for the site, all sorts of stuff. Different features, guides, news. All sorts of good stuff for a bunch of different gaming genres. So anything you're into, there's probably gonna be something there that interests you. So again, they are what enable us to do what we love to do for a living. So please definitely check them out. And we are here each Friday because of them. So I think today's episode is going to be pretty good. I think it's getting into, for as much time as people spend playing, whether online MMOs or offline RPGs, I think talking about a little bit about character creation, which might be one of the biggest actual time sinks into a game that you can have. I think sometimes I've taken longer on that than playing half the game. So yeah, it's definitely, I think, a good topic to get into.
Yeah, I agree. I Characterization to me has always been a big thing because everybody knows by now. I'm sure if you know anything about me, huge fan of RPGs and immersive games, and characterization is like mandatory. I think even in a game where you're not getting to pick your own character or create your own character in some way, getting to know the character who you're playing as is huge in making the games be relatable to people. So I mean, there are some games out there that use no characterization at all. You've got like Pong or, other, I don't know, strategy games or puzzle games or things like that that might not have characters, but even some of those games have characters in them. I remember playing Dr. Mario when I was a kid, and you'd fight over who could be, which character when you're doing, even just dropping the puzzles. So it's kind of interesting to see how the personality of the characters that we're playing as kind of ties into some of the appeal to certain games. So, but anyways, to kind of open up the topic much more broadly, I kind of wanted to talk about character creation in general and character selection in games that don't have character create. To kind of talk about some things that they do, some things that we like about them, some things we notice about ourselves doing with them. So I guess the first question I'll ask over to you, Jeremy, is what's your favorite game character? Well, yeah, before we even get into what I was saying, what's your favorite game character, and maybe tell me why that character...
So, character of any game ever?
Yes.
Okay, so I've mentioned in the past that my favorite game of all time is the old RPG Xenogears. Within that game, there's a character by the name of Saitnuski or Hugo Ricto. He had two different names. Not going to get into all that, but anyway, definitely my favorite character I've ever encountered, just because he had this amazing mix of being very calm, like very intelligent, very wise, just about the world, like knew things that most people didn't, and at the same time was a complete badass without having to be like loud about it. It was a very calm and calculated but badass while also being incredibly wise. So that appealed to me greatly, and I think and we can get into it more, but I think in most times that I'm looking to create a character, I think I look to emulate that a little bit, just because that character I think stuck with me more than any other.
Yeah, for me, it's really hard because I played a lot of tabletop games, so a lot of characters that I really enjoyed were like created by friends or by DMs and stuff that I was playing with. But for a game that anybody could be relating to, I really liked from the Shining Force series, one of the favorite ones I played. I really liked Slade. He was an intriguing character. Like in the second Shining Force, was this kind of bad guy, but he eventually makes this turn. He's kind of the whole reason the game is like exists. He has, created the dark, like unleashed the darkness, accidentally being a thief, and it has these cataclysmic events, and then later on, he ends up joining your team, and you get to include him in your battles and stuff. Different type of game, a strategy game where you're not really playing as the characters, you have a force. But really cool character, and he was just like really simple, but I always just remember it because I was a young kid, and I just really thought it was cool how he was used in the story, and that just kind of opened my eyes to how every little character, you don't know how big of an impact they can make in a game setting or in a story, so I always thought it was really cool to see those types of characters. And then the main character in those type of games, you actually get to choose the names of your main character and get to kind of be the hero in that instance. So I always thought that was interesting. But yeah, that's kind of mine from a big general gaming thing, but of course there's so many others. I loved Rufus and Sephiroth from the Final Fantasy storyline, obviously 7, and I believe they're making a remake now, so who knows if that's going to be how it's going to be. But yeah, it'll be really cool to see how they remake and bring to life some of those characters that were brought to life really well, I think, even with the older graphics and stuff. It'll be cool to see if they can achieve the same level of, I don't know, immersion that was there before. So pretty cool stuff.
I think it'll be pretty good, yeah.
Yeah, so moving on to the next thing, I guess, then, the kind of getting into general, what I was saying earlier before is, character creation. Some games use a lot of it, some games use very little, some just use character selection. I'm going to pass it over to you, Jeremy, first and ask, what style do you prefer, and is it genre dependent? Maybe is it dependent on the game? Kind of talk about what character process you enjoy the most and why.
So I think the games that I ended up spending probably the most time in character creation was actually the original Dragon Age. And there, just because of the inordinate amount of time I spent playing that game, I went through, multiple characters. And I guess the philosophy kind of changes because part of it was class-based. So like the first time through, kind of, I don't even know how to describe it. I kind of have this mental image of a character that I'll often go through for the first playthrough, but through playing multiple classes and multiple roles, I ended up creating vastly different characters, both male and female, for different roles. Sometimes roles you wouldn't expect, like my I don't remember what it was called. I think warrior class or whatever. The melee was a female, whereas like my rogue, which was a more stealthy agile character, was a male. So like trying to kind of get a good mix, I guess, and not just completely going a warrior, big big hulking man, mage has to be like fragile female, like trying to I guess mix it up a bit, because I think that's part of how you. Like the whole thing about character creation is that you have some control over this world, right? So I think part of what made that interesting to me was being able to create as my own world and not just making it what you see, that whenever characters are just handed to you, making it the same stereotypes every time and really, I guess changing things up a bit. And also I've always had, I don't know if I can ever express my love for Xenogears enough, but I generally will have at least one or two characters where I'll attempt to make them look like Xenogears characters in just entirely different games. So that's always fun for me too. And yeah, as I said, character creation takes a long time, but totally worth it.
Nice. Yeah, you kind of you briefly mentioned something that I'm going to try and shove under the rug for a little bit until towards the end of the show we're going to talk about kind of the impact of that and the psychology behind it. But for me, yeah, the character creation for me, as somebody who's kind of, I'm a writer, I like to create characters and stories and really in depth, so I've always favored games that have a high level of customization that you can do to the character. I've always really enjoyed that. I look at, there's a lot of MMOs out there that have good character customization. Final Fantasy 14 has one of the best that I've seen. It's just so deep. You can do so much to it, and the world, the kind of universe, has so many ways you can go about it. So I really liked that one. But I'm also always intrigued by the way MOBAs do their character selection. Kind of this, the developers create the characters, but it's interesting how people pick certain champions or certain styles of champions, and I think that almost goes more to more to a kit set that people prefer to play with. It's a style
Right.
of play, but it's kind of interesting because I don't think, before, I want to say when I was playing the original Dota, I just kind of picked, one that I liked the skill set of. But when League of Legends came around, I started playing that early on. I was looking at, who looked cool, who did I like, whose story did I like, and who, seemed like a badass, or who seemed like really fun and interesting. So I've always looked at that game a little differently because they tried to, I think fairly successfully for that genre, implementing this concept of lore and story and this overarching, you know, world that these little matches are taking place in. I thought they did that really well. Maybe could have done more heavily, but at the same time, if they do that, does it take away from the impersistence of you know, of the games being, just
Right.
it. I think that the way they did it makes it to where the immersion feels right, but yeah, it's always interested me about
Yeah.
the way characters put into MOBA characters.
Well, I can give you actually a little quick anecdote on that. Because with a game like League of Legends, for example, if you want to play it all seriously, obviously the character's kit matters more than their appearance, their lore, obviously. Because if you're playing a character because you like it, but they're terrible in the current meta, you're just hurting yourself. I will say there are people that have done that though. Like I've seen stories about it. But for the most part, obviously you are more worried about how the character actually functions. I will say, for me personally, my favorite character in League of Legends is Wukong. I really enjoyed him thematically. I like his kit, but I enjoyed him thematically. He is based on the real life lore of Sun Wukong, which actually did cause me to do some research into that and learn about the actual lore that inspired the character. So there is actually some ways in which that really can affect things. I think it's pretty cool.
Yeah, when I first started playing, I didn't really gravitate to any character initially. I think I tried out Pantheon at first because I was into the whole Spartan thing. That was back when I was watching the Spartacus TV series. It was pretty
Right,
awesome.
right.
But yeah, so I tried him out and didn't really like his kit set. So yeah, like you're saying, the kit set kind of overrode the character like appeal, I guess. But I kind of hooked on to Tryndamere and Nidalee as like this. That I just liked the way they looked, liked the way they played, and they had kind of cool stories. So they fit with me. I was really picky with champions. I only played a few at first because they had to fit in like every way. I had to like them. So, but yeah. So I think that when you're looking into games, whether it's an MMO or a MOBA, either one, like there's some amount of character appeal that influences people's decisions. I mean, when I think of a MOBA, there's some characters that, I probably would play because their kit fits mine, but I just don't like the way they look or their story, something about them, and it just doesn't appeal to me. So I think that even when you're in that type of game, this characterization kind of influences, what we do to some extent, maybe not on battlefield actions, but and I think this aspect of characterization is exaggerated extremely in MMOs because something you were alluding to a little bit earlier was that having some influence on the world, and I think in an MMO, while a MOBA has its social elements, teamwork, cooperative gameplay, and talking about the game with friends, there are a lot of social elements to that game. I feel like a MMO actually causes you to have social interactions in character more. So maybe not completely in character, but obviously when you're interacting with anybody else in a MOBA, I mean in an MMO, it has a lot to do with what you're. And sorry, I need to clarify MMORPG for that because an MMO could be anything these days apparently, like handheld games. Who knows? So yeah, but for an RPG, you get in, and any interaction you're having with a player, even if you're not acting in character, your interactions are based on your character choices, what class you've chosen, what specialization, all these things. So I think that's a really interesting component to characterization and how, at least for the current, like the traditional setup right now and the way of things is that what you're choosing for your kit set and stuff it's like an actual choice you make, a character create in most games, and therefore all the interactions you can have are determined by that what you've chosen before you've started the game. So I always think that's an interesting element because you know you're basically making a choice before you even know anything about this world. You're committing to something. It's really interesting, and we're seeing a lot of that change with different games. I believe um, Firefall and Final Fantasy XIV have provided options where it's very easy actually to branch out to different things that you know maybe change your mind on things. So, but it's becoming a more popular thing. But anyways, getting to the topic of MMORPG specifically, I kind of wanted to ask you, essentially, if you're going into a MMORPG, what's the archetype you kind of look at first? And after you answer that, kind of go into some detail about why that appeals to you and what influence that has on the way you make your character, appearance-wise and all that.
Right. So I don't even know if I can explain the why part, but I've always gravitated towards some sort of magic user. I don't know. Maybe it's just because like I'm in this fantastical world. Might as well use some magic. I don't know. I've usually gravitated towards that. With that said, I do still, depending on the game and depending on how it works, I do still enjoy some melee combat. So, depending on the game and depending on how in depth the character creation system is, I usually, if possible, like some combination of the two. Some games you can't really do that effectively, so if that's the case, I usually just end up with a standard mage or whatever. Um, like my dream character, which I've never really had the opportunity to play, maybe it's just because I haven't played the right games. I don't know. My dream character is some sort of I think melee magic user, with like still using elemental magic or whatever, but melee either through just melee combat or through swords or whatever. But yeah, some sort of mage, like even in something as simple as say like Diablo 2, which you don't get to customize the appearance of your character or anything. Still, my first character was a sorceress, and my most played class, even though I played all of them, my most played class was a sorceress. So, yeah, I will generally gravitate towards that. As far as appearance, I've gone several different ways. I've gone both male and female. Just yeah, I've kind of just I think kind of explored the full spectrum, particularly for the mage class. Again, we can get into I guess the psychological aspect of that later, but yeah, it's kind of what I gravitated towards. This I don't know exactly what it is. I think it's just because like when you're young and because now we're older gamers, we're jaded, we've seen a lot of things, right? But when you're young and you're first starting in these kinds of games, and maybe there isn't as much customization, that's something like even the first Diablo, something like that. When you're first starting in these games and suddenly things are available that have never been available before, you can create a character and you get to choose. Like magic is the most mystical and fantastical thing that you can have access to. Like if I wanted to in real life, I could go swing a sword around. I mean, I probably shouldn't, but I could. I can't create a fireball or a bolt of ice or something and throw that somewhere. So I think it just stems from probably a very young age that's the first thing that really stands out as holy crap, I can do this in a game. So I think that's probably what led me down that road. Be my guess.
That's interesting. I'm kind of like the opposite side of the same area you're in. I think I always gravitate towards, a melee or a martial class, but I like to have that little bit of a splash of magic, like some abilities or, some things that are just a little bit supernatural to kind of make it more of a hybrid. And hybrid, kind of a term in RPGs. From if you look back at like the old EverQuest or something, you've got the martial classes, your rogues, warriors, all those types of things, and then you've got your casters. And the hybrids are those ones that kind of are the class you're talking about. This caster slash melee, and those are the ones I like too. I kind of played the ranger a lot, played Shadow Knights a little bit when I wanted to be more into the magic side of it, and I always thought those classes were fun because you got to try a little bit of everything. But now today, MMORPGs are being made where it's more of this horizontal progression than vertical, where it's basically a collection of a lot of different things. This is something that different games are experimenting with. Where Ultima Online was the first big MMORPG where you really could do anything, and you'd level up any skill, and you only had a certain amount of points that you could have. So, you could only have so many skills maxed out. So you'd drop your casting to have, your melee built up, or, other various skills. It was a bit more complex than that, but basically that's kind of how it works. So that game was one of the first to do it in this, like, sandbox style, but now it looks like more games are moving to this, like, allowing people's characters to actually change over time rather than be set in, you know, whatever you chose when you first started out. Because I think that's one thing that it started with and well, it didn't start with EverQuest, but that was the first big MMORPG where, you choose a role, a class, and then that's who you are in this giant social network. Because, I mean, other RPGs have existed for a long time. I played through the 90s and stuff, I played a ton of RPGs, and you'd pick a character, and that's who you were in that game, and, in that type of context, it was fine. You weren't really interacting with anybody, but in an online environment with a bunch of other people in a social game, it actually makes a big difference when you kind of peg yourself into something, and then maybe you're playing that game for multiple years and your personality kind of shifts a little bit, or you want to do something different, but you're not really known as that. So, for a lot of people that take RPGs really seriously and play into their character a lot, it's kind of an interesting thing I've noticed, and I've always wondered why it hasn't started to shift till now. So that's kind of an interesting bit that I wanted to kind of talk more about and ask you, what are your thoughts on the way MMORPGs are kind of evolving into more of this? They're kind of getting rid of this idea of levels and, vertical progression within, what you choose to be, and expanding into more of this, like, sandboxy, hey, I want to do a little bit of this, I want to do this, and you can actually progress, one way or another, or change, and your character can change with you.
So I have actually an argument for both sides of that. So I'll start with the argument for more of the vertical progression of you're in this class, so here's the things you can do. And I think particularly within an MMO, the argument for that is that if you need party play, especially if you have to play with strangers, them just knowing what class you are at least gives them some idea of what to expect of what your character can and can't do. And I think in a game, if you're looking to just quickly party up, to do a certain mission or raid or boss or whatever, having some idea, or at least a pretty solid idea of, okay, here's this character, here's what they can do, without having to spend 20 minutes explaining, your particular skill choices and why you went the way you went, and no, that thing that most people in my class do, no, I don't do that, I do this instead. Just having a solid, at least foundation of what to expect can be helpful, in a game like that, just to quickly party up and do whatever it is you're doing.
Now,
so I think that's one argument for that style.
Before you jump on, I want to actually add to that, because I think that's a great point. The pacing of today's MMORPG is just kind of this blazing fast, I want to get to the end game content, and people are kind of racing through things. So, you are looking for that fast group up option, and the way the way kind of everything is designed right now, it just kind of encourages people to, have that quick, like, just, you see, what the person is, and you're forming groups, and that's how it is. There's also, too, another thing about games, a lot of these MMORPGs today, is there's no, you're not going through the world as your character in any contextual way. I'm trying to figure out an easy way to explain this, but, you're going through the world just to pursue the goals you want to pursue, and they may or may not have anything to do with what your character actually is. That's basically the gist of it. So, you meet up in these big hubs, or you have the handy World of Warcraft group finder, and you're just queuing up, and you've got the right roles, and you're meeting the right people, and you're able to form groups quickly to pursue these things to get to end game content. So I think it's interesting, I definitely agree with you. In today's current setup, there's a reason that these things are the way they are, and so I'll just end it there, and you can go on to your next point.
All right, no, I appreciate that. Yeah, so the flip side of that is that when you do have a more, I guess, open space to explore with your character, and that there's a lot of different ways you can go, there's a couple benefits to that. So, A, obviously, you feel like it's personalized more for you, so that you're not just the same as the 100,000 other players playing the same class. That there is something that makes you unique, and that can certainly be a very cool experience within the game. And the other benefit is, if you do change your mind, or if you picked a class because you thought it was going to be really cool and it was going to do these things, but instead it's kind of lame and it does these other things. I know for me, as I said, I'm not a huge MMO gamer, but the times that I have tried, I've actually spent like a good, I don't know, hour or two before even creating my characters, looking up what the classes do, at all stages of the game, so that I know if I pick one and I'm locked into it, that I better be happy with it, for the rest of the time that I'm playing this game. So like, I guess removing that stress a little bit of, well, I can pick this class, but even if I don't like what I'm doing, right here, I always have the option to branch out here, and then I can go do this. So I think those are two very cool things. Is that, A, you don't have to worry about, oh, well, I picked this class and I invested 50 hours into it only to find out that I don't really like it that much. So now if I want to do something else, I have to start back from the beginning. And then B, you feel like the character really is yours. It's not just the same as it is, however many other players are playing that same class. So I think there's definitely some benefits to that side as well.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mentioned UO before, but there's other games too that are kind of pursuing this type of idea where in UO you built up skills, and the things that you did actually is what skills were built up, and the things you didn't do is what skills were decayed, or and it's interesting. Revival's developer from Ilphonic, he's Snipe Hunter's in the chat there with you guys, and he can give you more info about their game. But Revival is interesting because it's kind of one of these like next gen type MMORPGs. It's really breaking away from what everybody's done for so long, and they are taking this idea the same way you're building up the skills you use. So say you start with some generic archetype, and you don't necessarily use some of the parts of that class. Those aren't necessarily going to be things that your character becomes. What you start doing and what you start pursuing in the world is what your character becomes. Which I mentioned earlier after your first point in your argument for the other side, how this is the way these current games are designed. The other way was the way they were designed. So that's how these people are. That's why you have the group finders and this archetype that has certain skills, and that's necessary for what it is. But it's interesting because I think Revival's solving some of the problem a little bit in this new design, where the way they're designing the game is such that when you progress up what you want to do, branching out and pursuing the skills you want, you're going to be known in the game for that, and people are going to search you out for those skills, because since everybody's starting out on that that same basis, they're not in necessarily any archetype, they're not set with a specific role. They're going to have specific wants they need to progress in their various skills they want to level up. So they're actually going to seek out people that will be complementing them in certain things, because the pacing is I think the pacing is going to be much slower than what most people are used to. Battles are going to be more intense, they're going to be more impactful. They're not going to be like many and superficial like you would experience in most MMORPGs today. So I think it's an interesting, point on that aspect. So it's kind of cool to see this shift in dynamic as games and developers are starting to move away from this model of old and trying to go somewhere new with something a bit more dynamic. And you may not have the same pace that you have in other games, but it's still gonna feel interesting and good, and your character's gonna feel like whatever you want it to be. You're not gonna ever get that same situation really where you're kind of pegged into something and you're kind of stuck there, which I think is a really intriguing thing. And that adds a whole nother question of people who've become altaholics in this era of you're stuck in this, and you need to group with other people so you have different alts and stuff, and kind of a whole argument there. There's another guy I do a show with, Diggs, and he's an altaholic. He has like 20 plans for characters he wants in the next upcoming game. So
Right.
Yeah, it's an interesting argument whether alts will exist in the future in the same way or not. But anyways, I'm probably like ranting, diverging a lot from the core topic here. But you presented 2 points, I think, and it's really kind of, both arguments are valid, I think, and both are talking towards a certain style of play. And I think that, we're noticing a shift finally where now both of these styles are viable again. Back in early MMORPGs with, Ultima Online and EverQuest, those, kind of existed. Those were like the early first generation type, examples of that. And then it kind of, the EverQuest model kind of took over. And then when Blizzard did their version of it, it obviously, stole the stage with World of Warcraft. So I think it's interesting how it's been like that for so long, and now we're finally starting to see more of this change from what's been before. So really cool aspect. But yeah, do you have anything else on this specific point before I get into the deeper topic?
I will not stop you from digging deeper.
Okay, so it was really interesting, like in the very first response that you gave, you mentioned, having an influence on the world, because that was, I didn't really think that it was going to go there so soon. So, but yeah, towards the end here, I kind of wanted to talk about, why characterization matters in all gaming. And, in MMORPGs, what you briefly mentioned, having an influence on the world being a big thing. Now that we're getting some more of this, kind of next-gen technology, there's a lot more procedural generation being used in games, more user-generated content, and actually worlds are starting to be designed. I mean, we've seen with EverQuest Next what they're planning there, Revival, and there's, various other games. They're going to actually allow people to start having a heavier influence on the world around them. So, and that's a big appeal to a lot of people, especially if, the main goal or the main joy you get out of a game is being a person in a an alternate world and getting to influence that and experience it with a bunch of other people. So I thought it was funny that you kind of brought that up, but that's kind of where I want to go with this last bit. I want to talk a bit about how MMORPGs, and I feel like it's not just MMORPGs. There's other games too. When you look at the MOBA genre, which is another big one. When you're a character in a game, you've got a kit set that totally influences the battlefield in a very specific way, and everybody's free to change between which champion hero they're going to be, between matches, and you get to kind of alter the layout of everything. Each battle, it's kind of like a microcosm of what I see modern MMORPGs doing over the long term, because what they're doing is they're changing to a completely new champion and the whole battlefield alters completely. Whereas what I'm seeing for next-gen type MMORPGs, EverQuest Next, Revival, this world is going to be dynamic in the sense that you're playing the same character, but your character can evolve with time, and the NPCs actually can change their motives over time and circumstances to actually do different things, and you get this ever-evolving landscape, which I think is really appealing in MOBAs.
Right.
So, go ahead.
I'm gonna jump in because I'm gonna grab something from chat real quick and expand on it a little bit. So DAP Crew was saying they were in a meeting once in a well-known company to argue for over an hour. What players want is to be able to have an impact on the world, which A, is insane that that argument had to be made. But B, I think it leads into, and I'll give my personal perspective. You let me know. I mean, obviously you're more experienced in the MMO genre than I am, but I'll give my perspective. Let me know how you feel. To me, what I want in a game like that, where I'm creating my character, where I'm going to have this one character and I'm going to explore the world. What I want is, like the real world, I'm me, and there's a bunch of things happening around me, and not all of it is because of me. The entire world isn't focused on me, because that feels very forced. Like, I want a world that is still living on its own. But like the real world, if you try hard enough, you can have an impact on things. Some things small, and if you really, try very hard, you could have a large impact on things. So I think kind of what I want out of an MMO or any kind of game like that is that, but obviously in a different setting, not a real world setting, usually more of a fantasy or whatever, kind of setting. and just that where the real world you might have to work for 20 years to have that kind of impact, just be able to have that same kind of impact on a world that lives on its own, just speed up the process a little bit, where I can start having impact on the world a little bit faster, not immediately, but to the point where I don't have to literally play for 10 years before I'm doing anything meaningful in the world. So basically, real world style in a fantasy setting, just sped up a little bit. That's pretty much what I feel like I'd be looking for in a game like that.
That's interesting. I actually, it was several weeks ago when I wrote about it, but I was doing kind of like a building the perfect demo, or the quest for the perfect MMO series, and I talked about real world emulation and used actually, I believe I used Revival as an example during that article of this, move towards emulating a real world and, all these moving parts. And, it's always been another game I mentioned in another part. I can't remember which one in that same series, but I was talking about Elder Scrolls Online, which is a game that really, bothers me because Bethesda is known for making excellent RPGs. They've made so many great ones. You've got Skyrim, Morrowind, Oblivion, Elder Scrolls, Daggerfall. Daggerfall was actually the first kind of RPG, like digital RPG that I'd played, on a PC. So that was a great game. But anyways, diverging from the topic here, Elder Scrolls Online bothered me because it was that same thing you were talking about, Jeremy. It was this issue of you're the focus of the world, like you're the hero, and that every NPC you're talking to, and you see somebody run up, that they're getting told the same thing, and it just kind of destroys this immersive feel, and it makes you feel like what you're doing actually doesn't matter in the world at all, even though the lore and everything plays out to you being the focus, and it just feels like the exact opposite. I think it's one of the most interesting things ever, and for a studio that's well known for making great RPGs, I think that they just totally fumbled the whole purpose of making an MMO with their with their world, with their lore. It was always interesting to me, so I'm glad you brought that up. I always thought, I wasn't sure how many other people thought that way. I have conversations with other people, RPG players and stuff, that love it, but it's interesting to hear that from somebody who's a bit more on the outside. You play some, yeah. But saying what you want from these games is actually where they're moving. That's kind of interesting. So yeah, that's pretty cool to hear, because that's what I'm hoping for too. That's kind of what I've longed for in games, because when you got into these old like EverQuest back in the day, or Ultima Online, when you first played those, yeah, you were that's kind of what they were like before the expansion thing got on, and you had this linear storyline catching the actual original vanilla EverQuest, and even vanilla WoW. Really, like when you first got in them, it was really this like self-operating world kind of, like it did its own thing, and you could go places and make an impact. But then when you start getting expansions stacking on each other, you start to get this linear pathway where it's no longer about just existing in this big world. You're kind of being forced down a direction that feels really superficial anyways, because you're not the focus of that story. So it's kind of, yeah, just an interesting dilemma that MMOs have put themselves in, and now they're kind of collapsing on themselves as they struggle to, I think if these games were differently, they wouldn't be struggling to keep subscriptions. If they stayed relevant. And so let's say the perfect example you brought up, you're in this thing that feels like a real life world in a fantasy setting. If you're still enjoying the impact you can make or the things you can explore in that world 10 years later, you're probably still going to pay the subscription for that. The reason these people are dropping out of these games is because they're kind of either their friends are leaving one at a time for whatever reason, and that's the only thing keeping them anymore. They don't really feel like they're doing anything useful in the world outside of hanging out with their friends. So I don't know, just an interesting.
I reached max level. I got the gear that I need. Oh, no one's playing. All right, whatever. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's the World of Warcraft cycle it's in now. They get their new expansions. Even Draenor, which was one of the worst they had made, and you had this peak back up to 7+ million subscribers. And that lasted for a few months, and then everybody did what they wanted to do there, and then they're done, and the subscriptions start dropping again. So, pretty interesting thing. But yeah, that was kind of, this is kind of like the part of the last topic I wanted to talk about with the psychology of, people playing into these games. RPGs kind of satisfy a very specific taste of gaming where, you're going to get to be, you get to play an epic role in a world, a living world. And maybe it's not even an epic role. I know a lot of people who would be totally satisfied being like, just a crafter in the world that's supplying gear to like the epic heroes. And I think a lot of these things haven't been, these different roles haven't been fulfilled by developers in the way they're designing these games. To actually satisfy, that wide, massive audience that you need to create this thriving online world, you need to provide things that appeal to everyone, not just, the combatant that wants to be the hero, going and slaying everything.
Right.
Because that's not everybody. But, yeah, so, I mean, have you ever taken any of the, I believe there's a quiz out there, the Bartle Gamers Quiz, where it tells you kind of, what your gaming style is, what your preferences are, or anything like that?
I can't say I've taken a quiz, no.
Oh, it's kind of interesting. I'm not sure where it is. I'll have to look that up and drop it in the chat. But yeah, there's actually a gaming quiz where you take it and it tells you you're this percentage explorer, this percentage adventurer, this percentage PvPer or socialite or whatever. So interesting little quiz, but yeah, that's out there. I'll find that for you guys and drop it in the chat or the description of the YouTube video. But interesting thing. But aside from that, similar thing that maybe a lot of people have done is the personality tests. we have our third co-host showing up for the last bit of the show. But yeah, so personality tests I think are really interesting because there's a lot of different types of people out there that have specific ways they want to go about doing things and answering. Basically everybody's built differently. They have different strengths and they have different things that they're talented at, and I think that gaming today doesn't support all of those in an MMORPG sense. In the wider sense, I think it does. I think there's all kinds of game formats out there that everybody can gravitate towards, but for fulfilling the MMORPG kind of world, full world, I think that they need to do a better job of that, and I think they're starting to. But yeah, I believe I'm just like ranting here, so
Well, that's what we're here for, isn't it?
Indeed. But yeah, so I guess let me see here. The last question I think I had for you. So when you consider yourself as a person, and what you want to get out of a particular game, for you going into, it doesn't matter what type of game it is, an RPG or a MOBA, when you go in, do you ever consciously think about what type of, role you want to play in that, as far as, like what do you want to accomplish in a given game, and how you can best do that through your character choice or class choice? Does that ever come into play, and have you ever thought about why it might come into play, or what might push you that way?
Trying to think if there is any correlation between my general character preferences between like an MMO or a MOBA, because MOBA is it's just very ability driven and what's needed in the moment, whereas with an MMO you're kind of planning for the long term and it's more for your own personal sake. So I don't know, I'm guessing I guess I've always drifted towards some level of combat power. You're talking about, not everyone wants to be, a warrior. Some people are happier, just like being citizens of the world, crafting, whatever. I guess I've always gravitated more towards, combat power. Which is part of, I guess, the mage, just because typically in most of these games, the mage is like weak in the early game, but, super strong in the late game. So that's just, typically been that archetype, I guess. So yeah, probably something along those lines. As for why, I don't know, I'm just going to go back to what I said before, probably something from my childhood. That's probably a subconscious thing that I couldn't even explain if I wanted to, but I'm sure there's something happened in my childhood that made that happen. So yeah.
Yeah, I always find it interesting because, like, for me, although, like, I enjoy a wide range of archetypes in games, When I play, I mentioned in League of Legends, I played Tryndamere and Nidalee, and I like Ari, I like Mundo. There's a wide range of archetypes there, I think. But one thing that I've noticed kind of in common, whether it's a MOBA, an MMO, or anything, I always like characters with a ton of mobility. And whether that comes with a mage or some type of melee character. And when I play an RPG, I like to have characters that can actually move around the battlefield. And when I try to think about it psychologically, I feel like I like to do things very strategically. So I feel like positioning is so powerful on a battlefield. Like to me,
Right.
I may not be the most powerful combatant out there, but if I can get in the right place and get the right angle, or effectively kind of manipulate the enemy into a certain place, I feel like it does something for the group, or achieve something that is kind of out of the normal, out of the normal way of people to do things. I love playing Mundo in League of Legends and just literally, pushing the battle, and Renekton too. I believe he's not really too popular, but I like to actually push the whole battlefield around and kind of ruin people's positioning if I'm not doing it myself. So always something I've kind of noticed lately with characters that I choose. But yeah, I don't know. Again, just like you, I don't really know what that is, why I choose that, but I do notice that no matter what type of game I play, these type of, and this is specifically a combat sense, but it's just a style of combat that I've noticed, that paralleling through whatever game type I'm playing. So just an interesting thing. I'm always curious to see if anybody in chat wants to say what yours are, and why maybe you think different, you choose different things. It'd be interesting insight as well. But yeah, I just thought it was an interesting point to bring up to kind of get people to think a little bit deeper about characterization, because it's really hard. I think most people would be hard pressed to name 5 or 10 games that don't have any characterization in them. It's really difficult to do. I sat down before the show and I was trying to think of some, and I found it extremely hard to do. And maybe it's just because I thought maybe it was just because I'm a big fan of role playing type games and characterization. So maybe that had me totally biased. But yeah, if you guys can think of a lot of games that don't, throw them out there, because I think it'd be interesting, more additional insight. But that's really, I mean, do you have any other thoughts, Jeremy, on this? Because that's kind of like the whole gist of everything I wanted to kind of tackle today.
I think that's it. I will quickly touch on what I was saying before. Is I think a lot of what affects kind of what classes we look for or personalization within those classes is probably largely based on our own life experiences, some of which we're probably not even aware are actually influencing how we feel about certain things. And I think that has a lot to do with it. So I think because everyone's life experiences are different, everyone has different things that they look for through character creation, or what class they like to play, or how they even like to approach something like combat. Even if everyone's fighting, they have different ways in which they like to do it. And I do feel like life experiences have a lot to do with that. So I actually think it's a very, very cool psychological experiment to kind of see what people gravitate towards. And sometimes if you talk to your friends about what kind of classes they play, I think some people will actually surprise you, because sometimes it won't be what you'd think they would want, and sometimes it'll be very different, and it'll be because of the most random thing, or because it's something that happened 10 years ago or something. So I think it's actually a very cool way to see people psychologically through their choices of how they like to represent themselves in a game.
Yeah. Well, we normally devote this last section to audience questions and answers. So if you guys have any, you can go ahead and ask them. But I'll start out. I'm just going to read a couple of the people in chat, what they do and why, because I think it'll be interesting to add to the show as well. But Snipe Hunter said, in MOBAs, he usually plays a defender type, someone who's the center of attention, in the sense that I'm unavoidable. So being that, I don't know, I guess, a defender in a lot of ways is that beacon for a team. Enemy team and a good team. It's somebody that you kind of center around. So that's an interesting aspect. Snipe Hunter has there. Zero MGA brings up a actually really interesting point in his. He says, I PvP in any game that's not already PvP focused game, like a MOBA. I like to play warriors or other close combat classes. I enjoy the rush of being in combat with everyone around you. and he says people react differently when there's someone rushing in hard instead of getting to cast from range safely. And I think he brings up an interesting dynamic because range plays in a big way into the way people enjoy combat. Some people enjoy, like Ranger for example is not a caster. Typically they're a martial champion, but they're ranged. So, and I think there are two different types of people. Some people like being in the chaos, and everything's going crazy and they're always having to move in position, whereas somebody that's ranged is, handling the chaos differently. They're trying to pick out their targets, it's a totally different style of play. So I think that's interesting. And, whether it ties into characterization or not, I'm sure it does. It just seems like that's another huge aspect, especially in today's MMORPGs, where what class you choose is essentially a lot of who your character is. Kind of a big deal. So, but yeah, and then Verde Manzana says support classes are fun, things that heal and buff, but I likewise enjoy the glass cannon types too. So pretty cool. Yeah, thanks for sharing, you guys. But that is there's not really anything else that I can think of to add to this. I really wanted to dive into this because I think it's something that people kind of, I don't think people really consciously think about a lot. It's one of these things that you just do because, hey, I think this is going to be fun. And I just thought it would be interesting to kind of delve into why it is, why it works in different games certain ways, why we do, why we make the choices we make, and if there's a future for what we want in games and how it's changing. So, and I think we covered all those things. We talked a bit about MMORPGs a lot and how they're changing. I think MOBAs are kind of ahead of the game in the respect of characterization because they've really achieved what MMOs are trying to achieve, what MMORPGs are trying to achieve by getting this, allowing people to change, to feel, play what their mood is, and alter the battlefield, do all the things that they want to do in a very compact, short-term way. So it's really, on MMORPGs now to try and find that same thing where they're answering, I don't even know, I'm sure, Jeremy, you have a better guess than me, how many millions of people play League of Legends, every day right now, and all MOBAs in general. Yeah, so I mean, I think it's a lot bigger than MMORPGs at the moment, so it'll be interesting for those games to capture some of that magic and provide that type of experience for people in a longer term RPG setting. So,
right.
But yeah, that's all I had. So, of course, if this is your first time seeing this show, we have past episodes. You can catch those on our YouTube channel and here on Twitch if you're watching it on Twitch. And of course, live every Friday, 3 o'clock. That's where we are now, 3 o'clock Eastern. And you guys can catch it live, participate in the conversation. Our Twitch chat has been active with all the people that are in there. Lots of good conversation, you guys. Thank you for coming and watching as usual. Just as we said in the beginning of the show, of course, if you like us, if you like what we talk about, what we're doing, support us at 10 Ton Hammer. We've got all of our written content there is actually primarily what we do, so go check that out. And join the conversation there. We've got forums back now, so if you're a forum person that just loves to dive into those, we're there on the forums too, so check those out. But did you have anything else, Jeremy, you can think of that I missed? I know I always miss something. So
no, I think you actually pretty much covered it this time. Also just, that the replays are also just available through 10tonhammer.com. The VODs will be there. But yeah, other than that, I'd like to thank our special guest today, my dog.
Our surprise special guest. Nice.
Yeah, there's a thunderstorm going on right now. He doesn't like it, so he needs company. Other than that, definitely appreciate you guys hanging out with us and chatting with us. We always enjoy that. Definitely makes the show much more enjoyable, so that we can actually, have a full conversation, not just between the two of us. So, thank you guys for coming out and hanging out. Appreciate it.
Definitely. Yeah, thanks you guys, and we will see you next time. Same time, same place, next Friday. See you guys later. Thanks for coming.
Thanks, guys.